It's the week that the world comes together to commit their efforts towards global peace and prosperity. The United Nations General Assembly opened a new session Tuesday local time with speeches made by world leaders. And due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, not all leaders made it to the offline event at the New York headquarters, but South Korean President Moon Jae-in was there to deliver his speech in person and also attended a key event on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Now, to encourage global efforts to achieve the comprehensive 2030 agenda, the SDG Moment event was attended by none other than boy band BTS. Making the opening week of the 76th General Assembly even more meaningful for South Korea is the fact that this year marks the 30th anniversary that both Koreas joined the UN. With much to discuss today, we are honoured to have joining us Ambassador CHO Hyun, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you today?
Fine. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for your time. And well, this year it's been an incredibly special year for South Korea, really, as it's the 30th anniversary that both South Korea and North Korea joined the United Nations. And as a career diplomat who served over 40 years at the Foreign Ministry, you were at the UN headquarters for the before and after of this significant event. And well, when you visited the UN headquarters back in 1990, just a year before South Korea joined the global body, did you imagine that one day you'd be stationed there in New York with a South Korean boy band fronting the campaign to advance the Sustainable Development Goals and become very much the envy of teenage girls everywhere?
Well, how could I have even dreamed of such things happening in my life? When I was here back in 1991, I was shocked to find that there was no seat at the General Assembly Hall for Korea. We had only a seat at the corner of the General Assembly Hall we were observers. So I was thrilled to see President Moon Jae-in delivering his speech at the SDG moment as the only head of state, followed by performance of BTS. Well, 1.2 million people were watching on live, and as of now, there have been 13 million viewers. So it was a big success. But more importantly, their message was very good. The youth today is a welcome generation, not a lost generation. What a nice and forceful message. Well, the SDG moment was for promoting the Sustainable Development Goals. To me, it was Korea's movement. Korea's moment.
Certainly, as you said, it was very much a moment for South Korea, but there were many moments throughout the 30 years that South Korea was a member of the UN that were quite memorable, and they marked significant milestones. What were some of those key moments for you?
Well, three scenes come to mind. First, I vividly remember back in 1991, September, when Korea had a ceremony of joining the United Nations from an observer state. And secondly, back in 2006, in December, there was a ceremony of Secretary General Pan's inauguration. I was there as Deputy Ambassador. And thirdly, this Monday morning, when President Moon was delivering his speech at the SDG moment. President Moon has been attending the high-level segment of the General Assembly for consecutive 5 years. But this time it was very special because the SDG moment is one of the most important events at this year's high-level segment. And President Moon Jae-in was the only head of state to be invited to deliver his speech at this SDG moment. And it was well received, so well received that many of Secretariat people expressed their appreciation to me.
And of course, as you mentioned, the SDG moment was very much a key event, and unfortunately there has been a reversal of progress in the SDGs over the course of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, what danger does this pose to future generations, and what barriers need to be overcome in order to really bring together more global cooperation amid this crisis?
Well, many leaders at the General Assembly this year have pointed out that we must focus on overcoming the current pandemic. And at the same time, we should do more to achieve the SDG by 2030. President Moon Jae-in also said that all the countries, wealthy or poor, strong or weak, should work together and together with the United Nations.
And well, President Moon, during his speech that you mentioned, he pledged the country's best efforts to help bring the world together and really foster inclusiveness and co-prosperity, which is at the heart of the 2030 agenda, which is, of course, leaving nobody behind. And South Korea was once a recipient of the UN Development Programme's aid and assistance, but this year it became the world's first nation to transition from a developing to advanced economy status under a decision made by the UN's trade body. What does this mean for the country and the global community?
Well, personally, I'm very proud to represent such a country, Korea. Korea has achieved democracy and economic development and also good governance. However, I know that we have to take good care of our democracy and also promote a dynamic economy through constant innovations. No bragging about the achievements, but we should remain humble to move on and not to move back. As for the rest of the world, we will share our experience with many developing countries. But again, we will do it in a humble manner.
And well, South Korea has focused on giving back to the world, and it's been contributing to the world through its developmental know-how, agricultural programs, and diverse programs really ranging from things like agriculture and water infrastructure to IT education for women. And it's also hosted a number of UN-affiliated organizations like the Green Climate Fund. Now, as the world is expected to see greater inequality and digital gaps emerge both within and between societies after the pandemic, what do you think are some areas of strength that the country can further contribute so that no one is left behind?
Well, Korea is a strong country in new technology, such as digital, 5G, big data, and AI. But more importantly, the Moon Jae-in government has been focusing on and pursuing inclusive economy. As you said, leave no one behind. So new technology and inclusive economy will be the new norm of the economy of the world in the future.
And during his speech, President Moon, he also called for international support on an end-of-war declaration between the two Koreas, which would also need agreement from the US and China. But just days before the UN General Assembly took place, North Korea shot 2 missiles into the East Sea, and there's been a stream of media reports suggesting that it's resuming its nuclear activities at the Yongbyon nuclear complex. So do you think at this point a end-of-war declaration would be feasible, and what would an end-of declaration actually mean between the two Koreas?
Well, unfortunately, such things happened, but I'm convinced that it is feasible. Nothing is more important than peace on the Korean Peninsula. Even a small military conflict can devastate the peninsula. That's why President Moon has been promoting peace on the Korean Peninsula and permanent peace. And declaring the end of the Korean War would open the door to complete denuclearization and to permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, we will constantly continue to work with the United States and the United Nations and other countries to this end. There is no way other than diplomacy and dialogue.
And well, Ambassador, the foreign press based in South Korea, also abroad, they've been suggesting that there's an escalating arms race happening between the two Koreas. What would your response be to this?
It's an unfortunate thing, but some criticism of increasing defense powers is not fair. While North Korean nuclear and missile tests are squarely in contravention of the United Nations Security Council resolutions, what we have done, we have taken measures are purely defensive. As a responsible government, we have taken the measures to protect our people. That's why I only hope that North Korea will come to dialogue as early as possible.
And well, regarding North Korea denuclearization, you've said in the past that there's no meaning to denuclearization if peace is compromised. And you also called for a peaceful pressure campaign. Would that still be your position now? And how should Seoul and the international community really react to the North's provocations?
Well, I still believe that peace should not be compromised because, as I said earlier, it will devastate the peninsula. So we have to work together with our allies and with the United Nations, while faithfully implementing the sanctions of the United Nations. We should seek dialogue with North Korea as well. Again, dialogue and diplomacy is the only way to achieve permanent peace on the Korean peninsula, but also it's the only way to achieve complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula.
And in addition to pursuing dialogue, South Korea and the United States have been discussing ways recently to deliver humanitarian assistance to North Korea, whose citizens are believed to be suffering not only from the health implications and economic fallout of COVID-19, but also a severe domestic food crisis as well as flooding since last year. What kind of assistance is needed by North Korea, and what kinds of international efforts are really needed at this point to move the process forward?
Well, basic humanitarian assistance is needed more than ever. And the Korean government has been holding the principle that humanitarian assistance should be provided regardless of the situation. And this is the position of the United Nations and many countries. The UN Security Council resolutions also clearly stipulate that sanctions will not adversely affect on the humanitarian situation. That's why there is sanctions waiver mechanism. And Korea has been working with many countries such as the United States to do it. We only hope that North Korea will respond positively on this issue as well.
And also engaging a bit beyond the Korean peninsula. Well, the world is seeing regionalism and frictions between security alliances intensify across the world. And do you see a growing role for middle powers like South Korea in cooling these geopolitical tensions and promoting stability?
Absolutely. As we try to reinvigorate multilateralism and the United Nations, the role of middle powers has become ever more important. For example, Korea has been an active member of MICTA, that is Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey, and Australia. In the same vein, Foreign Minister Jung Eui-yong, my foreign minister, attended the MICTA Foreign Ministers meeting today to discuss its enhanced role at the United Nations.
And well, you began your term as our ambassador to the UN back in 2019, but what do you hope to achieve during your term there as our permanent representative to the United Nations?
Well, I am always feeling proud to represent Korea. And as such, I do my best to equally, actively participate in the debates on the global issues at the United Nations. Nevertheless, we still have to achieve permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. It's an imperative. So I only hope that the peace process will be realized in the near future.
Well, thank you, Ambassador, for your efforts for global peace and prosperity that goes beyond the Korean Peninsula. And well, this is where we wrap up the interview today. That was Ambassador CHO Hyun, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations. It's an honor having you on our program. Thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you very much for watching.